Welcome back into the Wake Up Call, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're about to hop into a topic that isn't specifically having to do with Alabama, but it's systemic of a problem that exists all across our country, and it made national headlines last night. And this is probably what a lot of you have been following. You know, I know we have some of the best college football fans in the nation in the state of Alabama. Can I get a little bit of a Roll Tide? Sorry for all those Auburn fans out there. I'm a big Roll Tide guy. All right, but right now what we're talking about is Ohio State football coach Urban Meyer being suspended 3 games following an investigation conducted by Ohio State into his handling of domestic abuse claims coming from a member of his staff. It was claimed that a member of his staff, an assistant coach, Zac Smith, allegedly domestically abused his wife, and there was indication that Urban Meyer knew about it. Urban Meyer's wife knew about it 100%, and so there was an investigation conducted into Urban Meyer following this. Last night, the university came out and said they had suspended Urban Meyer for 3 games. And I'm furious. 3 games. This man knew about domestic violence that was happening over a number of years. We talked about it earlier in the month on this program when this investigation was launched. 3-game suspension. He should be fired for what he did. And I'm going to make the case for exactly why he should be fired. If you've been following this, you disagree with me, you agree with me. 866-551-9933. So let's just start from the beginning. Here we go.
I know that the impact that the events of the last 3 weeks have had on this institution, an institution that I love, and how challenging this has been for our community, our president, a man who I have great respect for, and for that I am deeply sorry. I'm fully aware that I'm ultimately responsible for the situation that has harmed the university as a whole and our Department of Athletics and our football program.
So when he says that, you start to think, okay, maybe he's doing good, right? He's taking responsibility for his actions, partly. You know, he knew that he is at some fault for what's happening. When I saw this press conference, I was like, okay, I think the 3-game suspension is weak, but that's the fault of Ohio State, not the fault of Urban Meyer. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm for it. You know, we're about 30 seconds in, maybe I'm for it. But then it's the rest of this press conference.
I want to apologize to Buckeye Nation. I followed my heart, not my head. I fell short in pursuing full information because at each juncture, I gave Zac Smith the benefit of the doubt. As I reflect my loyalty to his grandfather, Earl Bruce, who was my mentor and like a father to me, likely impacted how I treated Zac over the years. I did not know everything about Zac Smith, which was what Zac Smith was doing, and I'm pleased that the report made this very clear.
It didn't make it clear. All this makes clear is the fact that you lied. He lied in a 2015 media day. In a 2015 media day, when he had full knowledge of what was going on between Zac Smith and his wife, he was informed of the situation. He told the Big Ten Media Day, I have no knowledge of what's happening. And then days later, he comes out and says, well, actually, I know everything that's happening. Because it was proven that he was lying. Because text messages were released between his wife and Zac Smith's wife, the alleged victim in this scenario. And so it's crazy. This is straight from the report. If you've ever heard an organization making excuses for the conduct of their coach and trying to gloss over a blatant denial and a lie, if you've never heard that, you're about to hear it for the first time. This is directly from the report. We cannot logically square Coach Urban Meyer's responses on Big Ten Media Days broadly denying knowledge of the 2015 events regarding Zac Smith with his extensive knowledge of these events in 2015 and the evident knowledge of AD Gene Smith of the 2015 events reflected in group text messages of July 23rd and July 24th, 2018 sent to Coach Meyer. In the group text, On the morning of July 24th, A.D. Smith suggested that Coach Meyer should acknowledge in his Big Ten Media Day remarks later that day the events of both 2009 and 2015 without giving details. Coach Meyer did not do so. No. He just did not do so. He was directly asked. They said, "Do you know about this?" And he said, "No." It gets better, though. It gets better. We accept that in July 2018, Coach Meyer was deeply absorbed in football season and wanted to focus on football at the Big Ten Media Days. Are you kidding me? Seriously, I'm banging the table right now. I'm so mad. Are you kidding me? He was so focused on football. You know, he really didn't want to address the fact that his assistant coach, who he allowed around kids, these young adults, all the time, was allegedly abusing his wife over the course of 2009 to 2015. He was so focused on football, you know, we're just going to accept that at this point. What a joke. It continues. The firing of Zac Smith the day before, the first time Coach Meyer had fired a coach, was also on his mind. Oh, so hard for him. The first time he'd fired a coach, he fired the coach for domestic violence. But when asked if he knew about the domestic violence, "Oh no, I didn't know." And then it continues. Was also on his mind, as was the erroneous media report of the felony arrest of Zac Smith in 2015. We also learned during the investigation that Coach Meyer had sometimes had significant memory issues in other situations where he had prior extensive knowledge of events. Are you kidding me? We're going to memory loss? Really? The guy who runs a high-caliber college football team took them to a national championship. Really? He doesn't have good memory in high-impact events? This is the game of football. You watch film for hours on end. You study, and you make your plays based on that. Your team was so good, you went to a national championship. But you have memory problems? Really? Really? It continues. He has also periodically taken medicine that can negatively impair his memory, concentration, and focus. All these factors also need to be considered in weighing the assessment of Coach Meyer's mindset on July 24th. You know, when he lied to the media. It's just absolutely mind-boggling to me. Listen. If he is a head football coach at a high-caliber program and he has problems with memory, concentration, and focus, and you know about this, you should have fired him a long time ago. The game of football requires, well, if I had to put it in 3 words, memory, concentration, and focus. Absolutely unbelievable. We'll dive into why this matters on a national scale coming back from break at the top of the next hour. Live from your Call K&S studios, Alabama license 11120. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wake Up Call presented by Yellowhammer Radio. Good morning, Alabama, and welcome back into the Wake Up Call. The time is 6:04 this morning, and man, we talked about a lot of topics this morning. We got a great show planned out for you. Really excited to say that we have Hans von Spakovsky joining us at 6:30 to discuss the Michael Cohen plea deal and what it really means. We're going to break down each and every count so he can explain to you what each of them essentially means. And there's no better person to do it. He is the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative and senior legal fellow at the Mess Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. And President Donald Trump appointed him to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity in 2017. So we're really excited to have Hans join us on the program at 6:30. We'll bring that interview to you live. You do not want to miss that. That is an excellent interview. So Right now, we are talking about what happened last night in the world of college football with Ohio State's head coach, Urban Meyer, being suspended for 3 games. And in my mind, that is the weakest punishment that could have been dealt out. He should have been fired. I said this from day one when we started talking about this and the initial reports came out. Now the investigation's concluded. Ohio State chose to essentially not do anything and just suspend him for 3 games. And this is so wrong. So wrong. He should have been fired. I still stand by that 100%. And right now I'm making the case as to why. We started this a little bit in the last hour. But before we hop back into that, I need to let you know that ISIS has claimed for a responsibility for a knife attack that just happened in the town of Trappes outside of Paris, France, where 2 were killed and others were injured. This suspect stabbed multiple victims before being shot by police. If there is any updates on this story, then we will continue to bring them to you live and have everything you need to know this morning. Okay, so let's hop right back in to what we were talking about with Urban Meyer. So we're about to break down a little bit more of the situation. And in order to do so, if you don't believe me, we're going to show you what aired on SportsCenter last night following the controversy. Now, I know this is a politics, and this is a God in Politics station, right? God in Politics show. So why are we talking about sports? There are other stations that specialize in sports. We're talking about sports today because it shows a more systemic problem that I see of domestic violence, A, and B, people with notoriety being held above the letter of the law and being held above the letter of common decency. It's like when you are famous or when you have notoriety in a specific field, you're not held to that. And we see this most with politicians, with media personalities, and with athletes. If you want to join the conversation, 866-551-9933. We're going to hop out to this audio.
Urban Meyer suspended 3 games. His boss, athletic director Gene Smith, will be suspended for about a half a month, starting on the final day of this month, going through mid-September. Bottom line, our Trevor Maddich, college football analyst, is here, national champion. 60,000 pages of documents, thousands of text messages, 1 press conference. It's done. There's a resolution. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are I still am not satisfied with knowing enough. There were a couple of things that Urban Meyer said that I think made me feel a little better about the situation, and a couple that made me feel still unsatisfied. One is that at the very end, when he said that he wasn't aware of the text messages sent to his wife, Shelley, by Courtney Smith, Zac Smith's former wife. Those apparently allegedly show photographs of her being bruised or having bruises. And I wanted the next question to be asked, which was, well, if you weren't aware of them at the time, when did you become aware of them?
Right.
And then what did you do? We didn't get an answer to that, and so I'm not satisfied with that. Another thing that I would like to know a little bit more about is that it was said that Gene Smith, the athletic director, and Urban Meyer did not properly report these allegations up to compliance.
Right.
But Gene Smith took responsibility for that. He said that it was his job to report it upstairs. So I would like to know from the body of the report to what degree they held Urban Meyer also responsible for not reporting it, even though Gene Smith said it was his job to do.
Sure.
So there are still some things that I would like to know. But right now it sounds like one thing is clear, and that is that the commission went through a tremendous amount of information, and I respect the work that they have done.
For the purposes of clarity, Trevor does have some questions. We should mention that Mary Jo White, who led the investigation, former head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, in her last comments before we heard from Drake, Meyer, and Smith, did say a full public report is coming soon. And we should mention that he did say, Urban Meyer, when asked twice whether he should have been suspended, said, quote, "I trust and support our president." That's usually a yes or no answer. He instead opted to go with, "I trust and support our president." Let's get a little different perspective from our Reese Davis. He is the host of ESPN's College Game Day. He saw that press conference in its entirety, like you all did here tonight on ESPN2. Reese, your thoughts on the news that Urban Meyer has been suspended for the first 3 games of the 2018 season?
I think it's a bit of a half measure. Zubin. To be honest, he either did something to rise to the level of his removal or he didn't. And
finally, somebody that is going to make a statement and not skirt around the issue. Here we go.
I'm skeptical about the suspension because of this. The goal in a situation like this is to improve the circumstances, improve the protocol, and hopefully help those who have suffered from situations like this long term as best you can. And to me, a suspension sort of smacks of trying to give those who wanted punitive measures against people just enough of what they wanted, if that makes any sense. Now, I understand that Urban Meyer and Gene Smith deserve some punishment. My suggestion previously had been that perhaps some type of voluntary donation of a significant portion of their salary to causes that could help those who've been affected by domestic violence or whatever might have been a more appropriate measure. It just seems like the suspension doesn't do much. The 3 games was clearly to keep him out of the TCU game, which I totally, if you're going to do it, I understand that because it would have invited a great deal more skepticism had you allowed him to come back for a big game like that. So I agree with Trevor wholeheartedly in that I respect the work that the commission did. It certainly seems at first glance and our first hearing to have been thorough. But I don't know that the suspension accomplishes what it might have set out to do or what they said they were attempting to do.
I don't think the suspension set out to what. I don't think the suspension does what should have been done either. I like that somebody is willing to actually take an opinion here and not skirt around the issue. I respect Reese Davis, the host of College Game Day, because he's able to give his opinion and give what he thinks should have happened. But I have a completely different opinion. I think Urban Meyer should have been fired. There are so many discrepancies in this report. Just like the previous guy pointed out that really wouldn't give an opinion, but he said there's a lot of discrepancies in the report. That was basically the summation of what he said. It's true. There are so many things that make you stop and say, what actually happened here? Because it's like somebody asked a question and then refused to ask the obvious follow-up. It's like if somebody asks you, hey, how you doing? And you say, oh, my dog died. And you're like, oh, man. Usually the follow-up is, I'm sorry, how? Or something like that, right? Essentially, Urban Meyer said something along the lines of, to every single question, it was, Urban, did you know about this? Well, maybe. Well, no, not at that time. The obvious follow-up, when did you become aware of it? And it was never asked. But I think the most damning piece of evidence that we can point to here, because everybody thinks that I'm taking this a little too far, but I think if anything corroborates my point of view, it's this. So this abuse allegedly happened from 2009 to 2015. Apparently, there was a group text in which Zac Smith, the alleged abuser, was in. Or I'm sorry, not Zac Smith. There's a group text between Ohio State officials on how to handle the Zac Smith situation. And in this group text message, Urban Meyer was present. I mean, we just read you the previous part of the report where they advised Urban Meyer to address it in the game day comments, which he didn't just not address it. He went as far as to flat out deny it, which they blamed on memory loss problems. A coach of one of the highest caliber teams in the NCAA has memory loss problems. Okay, not buying that. But this is the most damning evidence. When Urban Meyer turned over his phone to the investigative team, it had no text messages that were older than 1 year. The abuse happened from 2009 to 2015. I get it. I really do, right? He could have just had something on. I've got something that deletes my text messages after 30 days just because I want storage on my phone. But it just seems really coincidental that when he knew he was going to have to turn over his phone to the investigative team, the text messages somehow disappeared. It's just like when Tom Brady turned over his phone for the Deflategate thing, right? He turned over a broken phone, right? He broke his phone quite literally. We all remember that? When Hillary Clinton's servers were found out, BleachBit was used, 30,000 gone. It could have been coincidence. I'll give him that. But typically, when something this big breaks and all evidence of your entire entanglement in the situation is gone, that's suspect. And if you have memory loss problems, like earlier in the report says, wouldn't it be a really bad thing to delete old text messages? If you really have that much trouble remembering things, wouldn't you want to keep down the written dialogue? Wouldn't you want to keep down the record of what was said just in case you were pressed on these topics later? Just all seems really suspect to me. 866-551-9933. But this points to a bigger topic, and that is the topic of domestic violence. And I want to talk about the fact that athletes, sports coaches, politicians, and movie celebrities seem to be held above the letter of the law in this country. They seem to not have to be held to the same standards, both legally and morally, that the rest of us have to be held to. I think it's wrong. I think they should, and we're going to point to a few other examples to exemplify this point when we come back from break. If you want to hop in this conversation, 866-551-9933. What do you think should have happened to Urban Meyer? Do you think the suspension was enough? Do you think there should have been no suspension like the previous analyst said? Or do you think it should have been harsher? 866-551-9933. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wake Up Call.
It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. That's the way it starts with
Welcome back into the Wake Up Call, ladies and gentlemen. Right now we are talking about the situation that unfolded in Ohio State over the past couple weeks and that came to a close last night with the suspension of Urban Meyer for 3 games for what I believe to be covering up domestic violence from the year 2009 to 2015. So, we're talking about this because there's a bigger issue at play, and that is the fact that it seems like politicians, athletes, and celebrities are held at a different standard when it comes to the letter of the law and when it comes to basic moral codes that all decent human beings should follow, right? I mean, look, we can all disagree on a ton of things, but I'm sure we can agree that there are basic moral codes that all human beings should follow. For example, don't lay hands on another person unless they are threatening to hurt you. And specifically, men, don't lay hands on women and don't lay hands on your spouse. I feel like this really isn't that hard of a topic to grasp. It's a basic moral code. And so right now, let's walk through some Alabama instances, right, in which this has happened, and I want to show you the right way to respond. So the first thing that comes to mind is a report out of 2015, right, when an Alabama player was arrested for domestic violence and Nick Saban had to come out and address it. So, if you're an Alabama fan, you probably remember Alabama defensive tackle Jonathan Taylor, who was arrested in Tuscaloosa on charges of domestic violence. Now, later, his accuser recanted her story, but this isn't the first time that Taylor was accused. So, according to the media release, officers responded to a victim who went to the University of the Alabama Police Department to report being assaulted by her boyfriend early Saturday evening. After interviewing the victim, who, quote, had minor injuries to her neck from the assault, police located Taylor at her residence and arrested him on charges of domestic violence in the 3rd degree assault and domestic violence 3rd degree criminal mischief. And then immediately, Nick Saban dismissed Taylor from the team, and this is the right way to handle it. Nick Saban faced it head on. He came out and said, quote, "Jonathan Taylor has been dismissed from the team and is no longer a part of our program. This still will need to go through the legal process, but when he was given an opportunity here, it was under strict guidelines, and we made it clear that this was a zero-tolerance policy." That's the right action. And now if we want to look at other players being held to different standards, I mean, let's point to any and everybody. Let's point to Ray Rice. Let's point to Arian Foster. Let's point to Jameis Winston. Do I really need to go wrong? There are the football players. What about all the Me Too reports that have come out that have credible evidence? Nobody's been arrested. Last time I checked, I hadn't seen Matt Lauer in cuffs. Right? Seriously. I mean, do you want to go on to politicians, or do you get my point? Seriously. Last time I checked, there were credible allegations of sexual misconduct with minors by a politician in this state. I don't see any legal charges. In fact, we almost sent him to the United States Senate. Politicians, sports authorities, sports people, athletes, and people in Hollywood, people in the media are held to a different standard. We see it when we talk about cases like Jameis Winston. We see it when we talk about cases like Matt Lauer. We see it when we talk about cases like Roy Moore. They all need to be held to the same standards that we're held to. If there is credible evidence to submit that a crime has been committed, move for an indictment and let them go through the legal system. It doesn't matter how much money they have, how much fame they have, or how much rapport they have with the community. Send them to the legal system. If they're innocent, let the legal system vindicate them. If they're not, let them be found guilty for the crimes they committed. Let the legal system do its jobs. And don't accept somebody like Urban Meyer, who allowed domestic violence to happen from 2009 to 2015 without doing a thing. And then when being pushed on it, said, well, I really didn't know about it. When that's found out to be a lie, then coming back and saying, oh yeah, well, I have memory loss problems, but I knew about it. It's absolutely unbelievable. Be like a Nick Saban. Seriously. Come out and say, short and sweet, Jonathan Taylor has been dismissed from the team and is no longer a part of our program. This will still need to go through the legal process. Big thumbs up to Nick Saban, innocent until proven guilty, but when he was given an opportunity here, it was under strict guidelines, and we made it clear there was a zero-tolerance policy. Everybody should be held to the same legal and moral standards.